everyone knows about Street Fighter 2, chances are you might even have heard of Street Fighters 3 and 4 as well. Not to mention all the spin-offs, prequels, cameos, remakes and re-releases that followed. But some of you might not be as familiar with the game that started it all. Today, on the Big Daddy D's Classic Game Reviews, we're going to delve into the past, 1987 to be precise, and see where it all began for Ryu and Ken and company. The original Street Fighter told the story of a certain Japanese fighter named Ryu, who entered an international martial arts tournament so that he could prove to himself that he was the best in the world. Playing as Ryu, although his all-American mate Ken could be involved as well in the two-player mode, players had to fight against 10 different opponents from around the world before taking on the final boss, Sagat, in order to win the game. One thing to note about the original Street Fighter was that it had some of the most annoying, most frustrating controls for a fighting game ever. Okay, so maybe there were a few occasions when I was playing Street Fighter 2 that I went to do a Hadouken but ended up doing a Dragon Punch instead, or vice versa, but other than that the controls were very forgiving. This is unlike the original Street Fighter where you had to literally work your fingers off just to pull off a special move. When you did, however, the results were devastating. A well-timed hurricane kick could deplete your opponent's entire energy bar. So yeah, not at all like Street Fighter 2 then. Ryu doesn't actually say Shoryuken whilst performing his Dragon Punch. He actually says Dragon Punch. Oh, alright then. Dragon Punch. I never realised that Ryu couldn't pronounce his R's. In fact, he's not the only one, for after defeating an opponent, they have this to say. Funny thing is that every character says that. Thank God there were subtitles, otherwise I wouldn't be able to understand a bloody word they were saying. The arcade version of this game also featured pressure pads instead of traditional buttons, and the idea was that you had to hit them as hard as possible so that your on-screen character did more damage with their attacks. The problem was that people really would hit these pads as hard as they could down the local arcade, and the chances of actually finding one that was working soon became rare. This would then later lead onto the 6-button layout with different levels for punches and kicks that would become commonplace in the series. It's funny how things work out, isn't it? We weren't exactly treated well when it came to home versions of this game either. Yes, I know that during my review of Body Blows I said that the Amiga version of Street Fighter 2 played like a dog's dinner, but it was a 3-course meal compared to the Amiga version of Street Fighter 1. Yes, this is actually how the game plays. Yeah. The Commodore 64 version was an odd beast as well. You actually had 2 versions of the game on one cassette. One side of the cassette loaded the American version of the game, which had incredibly blocky teletext-like graphics, and on the other side it had the European version, where all the characters seemed to bounce around the place and bear resemblance to the Michelin Man. Some versions of the game, such as the TurboGrafx 16 version, couldn't even get the fucking name right. Fighting Street? And of course we had to put up with all the unofficial sequels as well, such as Human Killing Machine. Just because you've put some random bloke in a white karate suit and a headband doesn't mean he's Ryu. Oh, and the game also had the bright idea of having an Alsatian as one of the boss characters. It's a lose-lose situation here, isn't it? Either you get savaged to bits by an angry mutt, or you get the RSPCA coming round to kick your ass. Having said that, Capcom weren't exactly doing themselves any favours either, with such unofficial sequels as Street Fighter 2010, The Final Fight. So anyway, the original Street Fighter featured a cast of characters that would later return for other games in the series. Ryu and Ken appear for the first time, although these are the only characters you can actually play as, and Ryu seems to be wearing his mum's slippers for some reason. Joe and Mike, the 2 characters you face in the USA, can be seen during the intro of Street Fighter 2. At least, I think it's them. It's also possible that Mike is Balrog. After all, in Japan, Balrog was known as M. Bison, which of course would suggest that the M stands for Mike. Well, you can see now why they had to change the names around over here. It was obviously to avoid lawsuits, and possibly from getting ears bitten off. Other recognisable characters included Aiden, Gen, Birdie, even though he completely changed his appearance and even his skin colour by the time we got to see him again in Street Fighter Alpha, and of course Sagat without his enormous chest scar. Apparently, it is during the events of this game that Sagat receives his his enormous scar, at the hands of Ryu, although you don't actually get to see it. Now, whilst the idea was good, and it would go on to spawn many imitators, the original Street Fighter was a bit of a pain to play really, mainly due to the terrible controls. If you do get a chance to play it, then for God's sake, don't pay over the odds to do so. You'd be better off getting hold of a compilation disc like Capcom Classics Collection Volume 2 for the original Xbox and PlayStation 2. Now, it is from these humble beginnings the Street Fighter franchise started. But much bigger and better things were to come in the future.
You've got a lot to learn before you beat me. Try to